Sometimes, the line between crime and courage is just one heartbeat away. When Ava stole a wallet on a freezing winter night, she wasn't chasing greed, she was chasing a miracle. But the man she robbed wasn't ordinary, and what he took from her in return wasn't revenge. It was her deepest wound. This is not a story of crime. This is a story of healing, heartbreak, and the kind of love that changes everything. Asterisk, they say, people only steal when they're desperate, but sometimes they steal when they've got nothing left to lose. Ava didn't grow up wanting to steal anything from anyone. She wanted to be a writer. She wanted to own a quiet little bookstore with a cat in the window and a bell that jingled when someone walked in. She dreamed about Paris, lavender fields, and the smell of old paper. But dreams cost money, and Ava had none. By 19, she had already buried both parents, watched her childhood home disappear in an auction, and spent every day since taking care of her grandmother Elena, once full of laughter, now confined to a narrow hospital bed squeezed into their crumbling one-bedroom apartment. Ava hadn't had a full night's sleep in 2 years. Between 2 part-time jobs and taking night classes at a community college, she lived on caffeine, prayer, and whatever food was left at the end of the week. Then came the winter that changed everything. It was colder than usual that year. Snow piled up on the windowsill. The heater had stopped working. Her grandmother's breathing had grown shallow, every inhale sounding like a struggle against time. The oxygen tank beeped inconsistently, a warning Ava tried to ignore because she couldn't afford to face it. She had called the pharmacy 3 times that week, begged the insurance company, argued with hospital billing, but in the end, nothing worked without money, and they didn't have any. On a bitter Wednesday night in January, Ava found herself walking aimlessly through downtown, her shoes soaked, her cheeks burning from the wind, and her heart so heavy it felt like an anchor in her chest. She had just left the gas station after trying to sell her old watch. The man behind the counter laughed. $20, take it or leave it. $20 wouldn't even pay for a third of the medication her grandmother needed. As she turned onto 7th Avenue, she saw him, a man stepping out of a sleek black Caroligan, to clean for this part of town. His coat was long, pressed. His shoes didn't touch puddles like other people's did. He looked like someone who never had to ask for help. Someone who never wondered how he was going to keep someone he loved alive one more night. Ava's breath caught. She hadn't planned on doing anything reckless. But desperation doesn't knock first, it kicks down the door. He walked past her without noticing, adjusting his watch. In one motion, she stepped in front of him, voice shaking like her knees. I don't want to hurt you. Just give me your wallet. He stopped. There was a beat of silence, just the howling wind, the honk of a distant taxi, and her heart banging in her chest. He didn't run, didn't even look surprised. Instead, he tilted his head, studying her, like someone reading a story they'd already read before. She couldn't look away from his eyes. Cold, unreadable, but not cruel, just disappointed. He reached into his coat. Her breath hitched, but instead of pulling out a weapon, he pulled out his wallet and handed it over. She snatched it, stuffed it into her jacket, and turned to run, but his voice stopped her. Is your grandmother sick? She froze. Slowly, she turned back around. How do you? Your hands are shaking. Your coat's too thin for this weather. Your eyes have circles so dark it looks like you haven't slept in weeks. You're not a thief. He pulled out a small card from his breast pocket and walked toward her. Ava wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. He handed her the card. Bring the wallet tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't be late. Then he walked away, disappearing into a building with gold lettering she couldn't pronounce. Ava stood there, card in one hand, wallet in the other. Her fingers were numb, but her mind raced. She wanted to throw the card away, wanted to run home, throw the wallet under the bed, and pretend none of this had happened. But something inside her whispered, go. Back at home. Her grandmother wheezed in her sleep. The oxygen machine blinked red. Ava opened the wallet. $740 in cash, a black Amex card, a driver's license. Lucas V. Grayson. She knew that name. Lucas Grayson was on the cover of business magazines. Youngest self-made investor in the city. Cold, brilliant, untouchable. Ava stared at his photo in the wallet. Her fingers trembled. She could take the money, pay for her grandmother's meds. No one would know, but she knew, and for some reason, so did he. She didn't sleep that night. She made tea and stared at the card. In the morning, she fed her grandmother applesauce, wrapped her up in every blanket they had. and kissed her forehead. Then she put on her thinnest smile, her warmest coat, and went to find the man she had tried to rob. The address on the card led her to a glass building that seemed to pierce the clouds, the kind of place where people wore silence like a badge of honor. Every step she took echoed like she didn't belong. At the front desk, the receptionist didn't ask questions. She just nodded once, picked up the phone, and said, "She's here." Moments later, a young man in a suit escorted Ava into a sleek office on the 30th floor. There, by the window, stood Lucas Grayson. His back was to her, but he spoke without turning. "Sit." She did, gripping the wallet in her hands. He turned around slowly, folding his arms. "Why did you come?" "I didn't steal anything," she said. "I mean I did, but I brought it back." He walked over and took the wallet from her. "Why didn't you just keep it?" Ava hesitated. "Because you didn't call the police. You gave me a choice, and I guess I needed to prove to myself I could still make the right one." Lucas sat down across from her, hands steepled. "What do you want most right now?" Ava blinked. "What? You, right now? What do you want most?" Her voice cracked. "I want my grandmother to breathe. I want her to live. I want to stop feeling like I'm drowning every time I wake up." He studied her in silence. Then he reached into his drawer, took out a document, and slid it toward her 3-month job. "Temporary, legal. You'd be working under my assistant. Administrative stuff. Light errands. $50 an hour." Ava stared. "This is a joke." "I don't joke," he said flatly. "You need money. I need someone I can trust. And anyone who robs me and still shows up the next morning might just be the most honest person I've met in years." She shook her head. "Why are you doing this?" He leaned forward. "Because I know what desperation looks like, and because once someone gave me a second chance to." Ava couldn't breathe. For the first time in months, it wasn't from fear. It was from hope. Asterisk. Some people walk into your life like a warning, others like a question, but a rare few walk in like a mirror, quietly showing you everything you never wanted to admit about yourself. Ava stood in front of the mirrored elevator doors, watching her reflection flicker under the lights. She had brushed her hair, worn the cleanest blouse she had, and tied her laces 3 times just to steady her hands. But no outfit could hide the weight she carried. The doors opened with a soft chime. As she stepped into the 30th floor, it still felt surreal. Just 2 days ago, she had been begging the pharmacy to extend her grandmother's prescription on credit. Now, she was walking into an office filled with marble, soft-spoken assistants, and people who spoke in numbers and deadlines. She was greeted by a woman named Jordan, Lucas's assistant. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of person who didn't waste time smiling unless it was for a contract. "You'll be helping me directly," Jordan said. "Emails, scheduling, filing. You'll be expected to observe, listen, learn fast, and ask no questions unless absolutely necessary." Ava nodded, trying not to look overwhelmed. The desk they led her to had a monitor larger than her kitchen window, and a chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure. She had basic computer skills, but this was another world, polished, controlled, built on quiet power. The first few days passed in a blur. She filed documents, delivered coffee, and took notes during meetings where half the words didn't make sense. She kept her head down, tried not to stare when Lucas passed by. He rarely spoke to her, but he always noticed her. She felt it the way his eyes followed her in brief moments, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet study, like he was trying to solve something, maybe someone. Ava didn't know what to do with that, so she did nothing, but life, as always, refused to stay silent. By the end of her first week, her grandmother took a turn for the worse. Ava got the call during lunch. She rushed to the care center, heart pounding, only to find her grandmother, pale, struggling to breathe even with the machine on full. The doctor looked at her with the same face she'd seen too many times. "She needs more advanced care. We can't manage her condition here long term." Ava bit back tears. How much? The number made her knees weak. That night, she sat on the fire escape outside her apartment, watching the lights flicker in the windows across the street. Her thoughts drifted to Lucas, to the strange kindness wrapped in his coldness, to the way he had looked at her that first day, not with pity, but recognition. He wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. He could solve this in seconds, but asking for help from someone you've wronged, that's harder than hunger. The next morning, she dragged herself to work, sleep-deprived and emotionally raw. She kept her head down, typed through trembling hands, and tried not to let anyone see the way her shoulders shook. But Lucas saw Dot by noon. He called her into his office. She entered quietly. He didn't look up from the papers in front of him. "You missed a signature on the vendor contract," he said. "I'll fix it." He looked up. He didn't come in today just to fix contracts. Her throat tightened. He waited. "She's getting worse," Ava whispered. "The oxygen isn't enough anymore. They're saying hospital care, specialized equipment, 24-hour staff." She shook her head. "It's too much. I can't afford it. But if I dance single quotes T ... I might lose her." Lucas was quiet for a long time. Then he slid a folded document across the table. She opened it, and her hands trembled. "A private care facility, state-of-the-art, prepaid for 6 months. I can't take this," she whispered. "You're not taking it," he replied. "You're earning it. You'll stay. You'll work. You'll learn. And when you're ready, you'll pay it forward." Ava looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Lucas leaned back in his chair. For the first time, he looked tired. "Because once, a girl I loved died. Because I didn't do enough. And I swore I'd never stay silent again." Ava didn't ask who she was. Some wounds speak loudest in silence. In the weeks that followed, Ava threw herself into work. She asked questions, took notes, stayed late. She learned about mergers, equity, legal loopholes, and digital security systems. She became a shadow in Lucas's world, silent, observant, and hungry to grow. And Lucas changed. Too, he stopped treating her like a stranger, began leaving small notes on her reports, started offering advice instead of commands. Sometimes, in late evenings, they talked not about numbers, about life. One night, after the rest of the office had gone dark, Ava stayed behind to finish a presentation. Lucas passed by and paused at her desk. "You know," he said, "you're more than capable, but you're still waiting for permission." "Permission for what?" "To believe you belong here." Ava looked down. "I grew up in a place where people like me don't get into offices like this. We get into trouble. Or disappear." Lucas studied her. "Then maybe you should stop being like the people you grew up with, and start being the person they said you could never become." The words hit her like a spark. She didn't respond, but something inside her shifted. Over time, something else shifted too. Their conversations became longer. The silences between them became softer. One night, he told her how he grew up poor, how his father left, how he built everything from nothing and lost almost everything when he trusted the wrong people. "You don't build walls like mine," he said once, "unless you've been burned." And Ava understood, because her whole life was made of scars. But she also understood something else. Lucas Grayson didn't save her because he saw a weak girl. He helped her because he saw a mirror, someone who knew how it felt to be drowning, and chose to swim anyway. One rainy evening, as they waited in the parking garage, Lucas turned to her suddenly. "If you had the chance to start over," he asked, "completely no past, no labels, what would you do?" Ava didn't hesitate. "I'd write stories, real ones, about people who survive." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then survive long enough to write them." In that moment, she saw something in him that few ever did. Not a billionaire, not a man in control, but someone who had once lost everything, and still showed up just like her. That night, Ava went home and pulled out her old journal. The pages were torn, the ink had faded, but the words still mattered. And for the first time in years, she wrote, not because she needed to escape, but because, maybe just maybe she was finally beginning to live. The city never really slept, but at 2 a.m. it did pause. Ava sat by her window, the moonlight glancing off her notebook as her pen scribbled across its last page. She had filled 3 journals already in just over a month. Not because she had the time, but because something inside her refused to stay silent anymore. Lucas had unknowingly handed her more than just a job. He had given her purpose, but purpose doesn't come without pressure. In the office, she was no longer invisible. Jordan now passed her real contracts to review, and Lucas had begun asking for her opinion during meetings. Not everyone liked it. Some side-eyed her rise. Others whispered about her past. A few speculated how a girl with no degree had somehow landed beside the most unreachable man in the building. But Ava didn't flinch. She had walked through storms worse than gossip, and she had work to do. Still, things were shifting around her, and within her, Lucas had started spending more time near her desk, usually under the guise of reviewing something, but more and more, his questions turned personal. "What did your grandmother teach you?" he asked one evening. Ava smiled. "To never beg for love, and to never leave a fight without at least one scar to remember why you started it." He laughed, a real one this time, not the polished kind, the kind that made Ava forget, for a moment, that this was the same man she once tried to rob. But memories have a strange way of returning, especially when you're finally beginning to feel free. It started with a knock on her door late. One night, she opened it to find a man in a worn jacket and a familiar sneer. His name was Ramon, a ghost from her old neighborhood. "I heard you're sitting pretty now," he said, leaning against her doorframe. "Grayson's girl, huh? Some climb." Ava stiffened. "What do you want, Ramon?" "Funny thing. That night, you tried to lift a wallet downtown. Someone saw you. Said you were with me. I wasn't. Didn't matter. Cops are reopening old files. Someone's talking. And if I go down, I'm taking everyone." Ava's stomach dropped. Not for herself, but for Lucas. His name being tied to hers was dangerous. Any scandal, even an old one, could ruin reputations, stocks, lives. "You're bluffing," she said. Ramon leaned in, voice low. "I don't bluff. You forget to know where you came from. And people like us, we don't get clean slates. We get cleaned out." The door slammed in his face, but the fear stayed. The next morning, Ava arrived early and walked straight into Lucas's office. He was on a call, but when he saw her face, he ended it mid-sentence. "What happened?" She hesitated, then told him everything. The robbery, Ramon, the visit, the threat. When she finished, she waited for anger, disappointment, the shutting of a door, but none came. Lucas didn't blink. "Did you do it?" "No, I went alone. That night, I was desperate, but I never worked with him." He nodded, then stood. "Then we end it." "What?" "I have people. They'll take care of it. Quietly, permanently." Ava stepped back. "I don't want anyone hurt." Lucas met her eyes. "Then trust me. I'll protect you." "That's not a promise. That's a fact." The words struck something deep inside her, something that had never been offered to her in that way before. Unwavering, unconditional protection. She swallowed hard. "You don't owe me that." Lucas's voice softened. "You're right. But maybe I owe it to the girl you were, the one who tried to survive the only way she knew how. And maybe I owe it to the man I used to be, too, because I wish someone had done the same for me." That evening, she walked home under a sunset that felt brighter somehow. But peace didn't last. Later that week, a tabloid photo surfaced: Ava entering Lucas's building after hours. The headline screamed with implication. "Mystery woman visiting billionaire Grayson late night." The article was thin, speculative, but the ripple effect was instant. The next morning, whispers turned into stares. HR sent her a cautionary note. Clients started asking questions. Jordan approached her with tight lips. "This job is about discretion. Your presence is becoming a liability." Ava stood, frozen, the paper trembling in her hand. She knocked on Lucas's door just past noon. He was mid-meeting but waved her in. She laid the letter on his desk. "I don't want to be the reason you lose credibility." He read it, then looked at her. "Do you think I care what people say? This isn't about pride, it's about survival." Lucas rose slowly, walked around the desk. "You're not some passing project to me, Ava. I'm not helping you out of pity. I believe in you, and I won't abandon you when the world starts." Shouting, tears welled in her eyes. "I've never had someone fight for me like this. You've never let anyone try." In that moment, something cracked open between them. Not romance, not yet, but something deeper. Trust, respect, and, maybe, quietly, a kind of love that starts with loyalty. That evening, Lucas called an internal meeting. He stood before his entire executive team and announced publicly that Ava was being promoted to personal strategy liaison, a role that had never existed before, but one he created to shield her from doubt. "This isn't a favor," he said. "It's long overdue recognition." And just like that, the narrative changed. Not because the world stopped questioning, but because Lucas stopped giving them power. Later, Ava sat in her new office, small but private. On her desk was a leather-bound notebook. Inside it was a note from Lucas. "Use your voice, even when it shakes." She held the message close, tears quietly spilling onto her lap, because for the first time in her life, Someone powerful didn't just save her. He believed she was powerful too. The first time someone asked her how she got there, Ava couldn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she didn't know where there really was. Was it the office, the title, the new apartment Lucas insisted she take, or was it something deeper, being seen, not as a mistake or a threat, but as someone who mattered? Weeks passed, and Ava flourished. Her ideas in meetings earned nods. Her late-night strategy suggestions turned into morning headlines. Clients requested her by name. She still doubted herself some days, but those doubts faded every time she heard Lucas say, "What does Ava think?" Still, comfort always walks with shadows. One afternoon, while reviewing case files for a potential acquisition, Ava stumbled on a document she wasn't supposed to see. A sealed report, marked confidential. She didn't mean to open it, but one wrong click, and there it was. Grayson Holdings had purchased several properties in her old neighborhood, quietly, anonymously, and not for charity, for development. Expensive condos, trendy cafes, a complete rebuild. The same streets she once ran through barefoot were being erased for luxury. Her chest tightened. Lucas hadn't mentioned this, not once, not even after all their talks about where she came from, not even after she told him how much she missed the corner diner that gave her free coffee when her grandma was sick. That night she didn't sleep. The next morning, she asked him directly, "Why are you buying up my neighborhood?" He looked up from his screen slowly. "Because no one else will. It's rotting. It needs investment. It needs protection," she snapped. "Not eviction notices." Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in surprise. "It's not personal, Ava. This is business." "You always said it was more than business," she replied. "You said we help people, that we don't leave others behind." He stood, his voice lower. "And I meant it. But helping people doesn't mean keeping them in the past. That neighborhood, it was dying long before I showed up." Ava stared at him. The man who had lifted her up, believed in her, shielded her from criticism. He was also the one now replacing the only roots she ever knew with glass towers. "You talk like you understand the streets," she whispered, "but maybe you've been away from them too long." The silence between them grew heavy. Lucas exhaled. "You don't know everything." "Then tell me," she challenged. "Make me understand." But he died in single quotes. Instead, he turned back to his desk. And for the first time since she had stepped into that office, Ava walked out without waiting for permission. She didn't go home. She went back to the neighborhood. It was quieter now. Fewer kids playing in the streets, more for sale signs. The old barber shop was closed. Mrs. Hahn's corner store was boarded up, and a construction sign stood where the local library used to be future home of the Slate residences. Luxury living, curated comfort. She stood on that sidewalk for a long time, her heart heavy with a kind of grief that didn't show up in tears but in silence. When she returned to her apartment, a box was waiting by the door. Onside it, a photo album, her grandmother's, and a note. "I bought the building to keep it from being torn down. Your grandmother's unit is safe. Yours too. I didn't say it earlier because I didn't want to look like a hero. I just wanted to keep a promise." It wasn't signed, but she knew who it was from. Her fingers grazed the edges of the photographs. Birthday cakes lit by candles made from matchsticks. A picture of her at 7, grinning in a hand-me-down dress. Her grandmother's weathered hands holding her shoulders like armor. That night, Ava sat by her window again, the city lights blinking back at her like a Morse code she hadn't learned yet. She thought about Lucas, about the way he lived in two worlds, one of numbers, and one of regrets. And maybe she was the only one who could see both. The next morning, she returned to work early. Lucas was already there, pacing. When he saw her, he paused. "I didn't mean to hide it," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to lose what we were building." "What are we building?" she asked softly. He took a long breath. "A life, a new one, for both of us." Ava looked at him, not the billionaire, not the businessman, the boy who once had nothing and still carried the weight of that silence in his chest. She stepped closer. "Then let's build it right," she said. "Not on top of broken people, but with them." He didn't speak. He just nodded. And that night, for the first time, Ava didn't write about pain in her journal. She wrote about rebuilding, not just buildings, but trust. Because sometimes, redemption doesn't come in a grand gesture. It comes when someone listens, really listens, and chooses to change. Asterisk the letter came on a Tuesday, folded neatly, no return address, no stamp, just her name in thick, almost childlike handwriting. Ava almost tossed it aside, thinking it was junk, but something about the weight of the paper made her pause. She opened it carefully. There were only 6 words inside. They remember, and they haven't forgotten. No signature, no explanation, just the kind of silence that makes your heart race, long before your mind catches up. For a long moment, she stood frozen in the lobby of Grayson Holdings, the letter shaking in her hands. Then her phone buzzed. Lucas texting. Meeting pushed to 3. Everything okay? She didn't respond, because no, it wasn't. For the first time in months, Ava felt like the girl from the alley, again the one with too many shadows and not enough shields. She slipped the letter into her coat and walked outside. The city, suddenly, too loud, too fast, too familiar. Old ghosts were stirring. She didn't tell Lucas right away, not because she didn't trust him, but because she didn't want him to fix it. Some things, she knew, had to be faced by the person who started them. That evening, she returned to the place she swore she'd never step foot in again. Eastgate, a crumbling building where her friend Layla used to live, where they'd once shared noodles on the floor and talked about running away. Layla hadn't made it out. The streets got to her first. But it wasn't Layla who answered the door. This time it was her brother. Malik, you shouldn't be here, he said. No anger, just truth. I know you left. Now you're back, in a suit, walking like you forgot the cracks in the sidewalk. I didn't forget, she whispered. I just, didn't know how to come back. He eyed her. Then why are you here? Ava pulled out the letter, showed it to him. Malik read it. His jaw tensed. You know who this is? Ramon. She guessed. Double quotes. No, worse. There are people who saw what you did and what you didn't do. They're watching because you climbed out. And some people, they don't forgive that. She leaned against the wall, the weight of it all crashing down. I'm not trying to be better than them, but you are better, he said. That's why they hate it. That night, she walked the streets alone. No bodyguard, no polished heels, just her and the pavement that used to know her name. She returned home to find Lucas waiting on her doorstep. I stopped by your place. No answer. I needed air. He held up a newspaper. Former criminal turned corporate consultant. Her photo was on the cover. They're digging, he said. This is just the start. She didn't flinch. Let them. He looked at her, really looked. You're not afraid. I am. But fear doesn't get to decide who I am anymore. Lucas smiled, faint but proud. You're becoming dangerous. To who? To anyone who thought you'd stay small. That next day, she called a press conference. Everyone advised against it. PR teams, executives, even Lucas. But she stood in front of the cameras anyway, her voice calm and firm. I was desperate once. I made choices I'm not proud of, but I'm not hiding from them. I climbed out not to pretend I was never there, but to reach back and pull others up. I won't apologize for surviving, and I won't stop until survival isn't the only option for kids like me. The room was silent. And then someone clapped, then another, and another. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was respect. Ava didn't sleep much that week. She was too busy turning her idea into something real. A foundation, the Phoenix Project, scholarships, job training, counseling, all funded anonymously, but everyone knew who was behind it. Lucas stayed quiet through most of it, letting her lead, letting her become something even he hadn't expected. One night, while reviewing budgets, Ava looked up and caught him watching her. What? He shrugged. You're not the same girl who walked into my life that night. No, she said. I think, maybe I never was. I just didn't know how to be who I am. He nodded, walking over, resting a hand gently on the back of her chair. There's something I haven't told you. She turned to him. I didn't grow up rich either. My father was an addict. My mother disappeared when I was 9. I lived in shelters before I built this company, and I swore I'd never go back. Her breath caught. Why tell me now? Because you reminded me that going back isn't always falling backward. Sometimes it's reaching deeper, and I needed to remember that. Ava looked at him not as her boss, or a billionaire, or even the man who changed her life, but as someone just as broken, just as patched together, just as human. And something between them shifted. Not into love, not yet, but into something that could become it. Trust, mutual redemption, maybe even a shared mission. Because Ava finally understood what her grandmother meant when she said, don't Run from the fire. Let it forge you. And Lucas, he finally understood why some people aren't meant to be saved. They're meant to save others. Asterisk. The storm hit the city without warning. Not the kind that comes from the sky, but the kind that breaks in newsrooms, shatters reputations, and exposes the scars people worked hard to bury. It began with a leaked video, grainy footage from years ago. Ava, 17, hunched over, pushing open the back door of a warehouse. Inside, a man unconscious on the floor, her voice barely audible. I didn't mean for this. The media had a field day. Grayson Holdings executive caught in violent past, from streets to scandal. Who is Ava Lane really? She didn't run this time. She walked into the office with her head high, heart steady, and fire in her veins. Lucas stood beside her at the press conference, but this time, he didn't speak for her. She stepped up to the mic and told the world everything about the night. Her aunt was coughing up blood, and she had nothing left to lose. About the mistake that became the moment everything changed. About the man she tried to rob Lucas and how he didn't punish her, but gave her a chance. I'm not ashamed of my past, she said, because it gave me eyes to see pain in places most people don't look. I won't apologize for surviving, and I won't stop fighting for those who haven't been given a second chance yet. There was silence, and then, a woman in the back, gray hair, worn eyes, stood and clapped, one by one. Others followed, not because they excused her past, but because they recognized their own in it. That week, donations to the Phoenix Project doubled. Hundreds of emails poured in. Single mothers, teenagers, ex-convicts, teachers, mentors, even police officers, writing to say her story gave them courage. But not everyone applauded. Investors pulled out. Too. Clients cancelled their deals. Lucas was summoned to an emergency board meeting. I can fix this, Ava told him. He shook his head. You don't fix truth. You live it. You face the cost, and you walk through it. But this company is just a company. You are the movement. She felt tears press behind her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she walked into that boardroom beside him, uninvited, unafraid. And when the board members suggested Lucas step down to preserve the company's image, he said something no one expected. Then I'll step down, but you'll lose more than me. You'll lose the future. And then he walked away. Just like that. About power, gone, but peace. It followed him out the door. Outside, under a gray winter sky, Ava stood beside him. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. I did, because the day I chose you, I chose what kind of man I wanted to be. A long pause stretched between them, a different kind of silence, the kind that doesn't echo but settles deep into your soul. Do you regret it? She asked. He looked at her not as a mentor, or savior, or leader, but as someone who found in her the very part of himself he'd been missing. I regret not doing it sooner. Weeks passed, and then came the moment that neither of them expected. A letter, not a threat this time, a request, from a youth detention center. Ava had been invited to speak. She almost said no, but then she remembered. The girl she used to be, the one who needed to hear that her story wasn't over just because it started messy. She walked into that room and stood in front of a dozen teenage girls in orange uniforms, their eyes sharp, guarded, suspicious, and she told them the truth, not just about pain, but about possibility, not just about mistakes, but about mercy. And when one girl raised her hand and said, "But what if no one ever gives me a chance?" Ava smiled. "Then you give yourself one. That's how it begins." When she stepped outside, Lucas was waiting. He handed her a folder. Inside, the deed to a small building, abandoned, cracked, and beautiful in its own way. "What's this?" "A place to begin," he said. "A training center. For girls who don't need saving, just direction." She looked at him, stunned. "You really believe in me that much?" "I believe in who you make me want to become." That night, they didn't say much, just stood on that sidewalk, watching the sun dip behind the buildings that once felt like walls. Now, they felt like stepping stones. And Ava understood something she hadn't before. The man she once tried to rob had never really claimed her life. She had claimed it for herself. She just needed someone to remind her she could. And now, she was that reminder for others. A force, a voice of legacy. Not because she had never been broken, but because she had learned how to rebuild. Again and again and again. And this time, she wouldn't be doing it alone.